Hi there. From the expansive Corel Desert to the labyrinthian jungles of Gongaga, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's Chapter 9 is another sprawling odyssey of sights and sounds, among them some of my favorite pieces of music in the entire game. Me? Gongaga. This? Music of the Lifestream. In an unprecedented move, Chapter 9 opens not with a new piece of music, but with the Chapter 7 arrangement of Barrett's theme, Bitter Memories. While using a repeated track to open a chapter might seem unusual, the entire scene takes place while in the very noisy buggy, so the track is barely audible as is.
Very well, so it is. Hold on to your hats.
A new track would have been almost entirely wasted here. And considering everything Barrett has just gone through, yeah, I think this was an appropriate choice. Following Yuffie's motion sickness woes, the party decides to take a short break. The Corel Mines arrangement of Yuffie's theme accompanies the scene. Okay, 2 Chapter 7 tracks in a row to start a new chapter is a bit odd, yeah. Odder still, though, is that this is Cait Sith's introduction to the party, complete with the Cait Sith Join the Party text box. So using a Yuffie track here, and not a variation of Cait Sith's theme, is really awkward. Like right after the track starts, Cait Sith even tries to hum his theme, which clashes with the Yuffie track. This could have been a fun moment with him humming his theme and then the background music coming in to accompany it. Okay, devil's advocate, Cait Sith's main melody leitmotif is quite mischievous and would have required a fair bit of work for it to fit this very breezy, lighthearted scene, which, melody aside, this Yuffie track does complement quite well. So it could have been worse, I guess. Chapter 9's starting off a bit rocky. The next track better be an absolute, undeniable all-timer. Okay, maybe this one isn't GOAT status either, although it is new at least. As the party heads off in the buggy again, we get to hear a new rockabilly track. The buggy gets a theme. Of course it does. This is a very straightforward rock and roll track with some bluesy guitar lines throughout. This is Yosuke Fukuba's first solo arrangement, and as we covered in part 28, he is first and foremost a guitarist, so yeah, this tracks. Fukuba arranged the piece, but he did not compose it. It was in fact his usual co-conspirator, Yoshinori Nakamura, who actually wrote it. I'd be curious to hear what Nakamura's original demo track sounded like, assuming there is one. That, or did he just send Fukuba over a handful of chord changes and said, have fun? Anyway, not a whole lot to say about this one. The chorus, if you can call it that, has a fun, freewheeling energy that perfectly suits riding around in the buggy. One neat thing about the track is that it follows the same format as the game's other mount themes, in that it has an obvious start and end, and doesn't loop. Once the piece is over, it'll wait a bit and then play the appropriate area theme. Oh, and speaking of, I think it's finally time to talk about the Corel Desert Field theme. For real this time. In the last episode, we discussed the undecoded version that plays when we first arrived in the Corel Desert at the end of Chapter 8, and that's the version you are greeted with here too, at first, until you've activated some of the Remna Wave Towers. The sense of expansiveness and mystery in this version is just fantastic. Lots of space, reverb, notes ringing out, it all captures the wonder and unknown of a desert. It doesn't sound like a video game desert theme, but still evokes it beautifully. The mandolin is the lead instrument in this piece, just like in Chadley's theme, which are both not only Shotaro Shima arrangements, but full Shima compositions as well. The only natural takeaway I can find here is that if Shima busts out the mandolin, you are about to get your socks knocked off. The post-Remnawave decoded version we'll get to very shortly is melodically much richer and eventful than this one, but the more even-keeled arrangement of the undecoded version allows the piece's underlying foundational composition to really shine, thanks in part due to the beautiful sound of the instruments. I love this passage a bit further in where the melody feels like a pendulum swinging. Accordion, guitars, gated bass synth, and airy synth pads all come together to make a mix that is paradoxically very dense and also spacious. Beautiful stuff. Once you've spent a couple hours exploring the desert, however, and you've found a few Remnawave towers, the sense of unknown wandering is replaced with a much livelier, upbeat arrangement of the track. This is the one known as simply Karel Desert on the official soundtrack. Tempo and structure is identical, but the instrumentation transforms it. The solo mandolin is replaced with a hearty cello, with the rhythm section giving us more of that patented Shima shuffle in the background. As the cello ends some of its phrases, an interpolation of the Final Fantasy VII main theme immediately comes in as a response melody on flutes. The cello returns with an additional phrase, followed again by woodwinds rapidly ascending in two 6-note sets, just like the main Let the Battles Begin leitmotif. I'll let you decide if that's an intentional allusion or not. For verse 2, the mandolin from the undecoded version returns, although it is paired with brass and string sections, which occasionally harmonize with it, other times functioning as lesser counter melodies. We then move to the pendulum-like passage I mentioned in the undecoded version. The mandolin, or maybe it's a 12-string guitar now that I think about it, introduces a new melody which fills out the section. I know I'm a broken record with the Shima stuff, but man, his mixes are always beyond reproach. The second half of the undecoded arrangement largely abstained from much melodic work, doubling down on the atmospheric synth and organic textures. That is not the case in this version here. This is the point where the piece kicks into gear. The mandolin and cello come together to form beautiful riffs that rise and lower, rise a bit more than lower. It's like they're tracing out the silhouette of a sand dune. Beautiful stuff. On the next verse, we get a massive horn counter melody as the cello and mandolin melody moves to more strings and the accordion again. Just such a beautiful, pleasant track that perfectly evokes the Karel Desert while miraculously sidestepping most musical stereotypes of what a desert usually sounds like. Composition, instrumentation, mixing, and thematic association, this is a 10 out of 10. Chapter 9 is officially absolved from its musically wonky start. Oh, but we're not done. The battle variant of the track is... God, it's somehow even better. Just like the preceding two versions, this one has the same tempo and structure, although like with all Shima battle tracks, the intensity is just off the charts. Following the bombastic intro, which mixes chugging electric guitars, heavy percussive drum sections, and a flamenco-inspired guitar line to lead us forward, we reach the cello-led first verse. The percussion is going ham, and the fast-strumming acoustic guitar also gives it a slightly different flavor compared to Shima's other battle themes. As usual, he utilizes the full registry of the horns, woodwinds, and string sections to complement his lead melody. The verse repeats with the mandolin and full strings section backing it. The horns are going ham in the background, and you can faintly make out the accordion again here too. For the pendulum passage, yeah, I know it's not a great name, but by this point I'm sticking with it. The guitar melody from the decoded version is still there, faint in the mix, but now the section instead emphasizes a rich tapestry of the various instrument sections playing over and under each other. The track highlight for me is the double whammy of the violin's gorgeous descending phrase, followed by the absolute triumph of the trumpets closing out the passage. Over-explaining it would just ruin it, so I'll just let it play out. This is a contender for the best 20 seconds of music in the whole game. The rest of the piece follows the template established by the opening minute and a half. I'm running out of hyperbolic things to say about Shima, so maybe it's good that this is the last we'll hear of him in this chapter. Hey, remember Gilgamesh? He's back, in sand form.
No way.
Activating the first Chapter 9 Proto-Relic quest introduces us to a new arrangement of Hurry, somewhat in the style of Yoshinori Nakamura's many variations of Hurry from Remake and Rebirth. Although the Hurry elements simply bookend the track. For the majority of the scene, the arranger strips it back to mostly synth pads and some light percussion for while the characters are talking. Following the scene, we get a debrief with Chadley about our encounter with Sandman Gilgamesh. It plays the track I lazily called Hazy Mysteries back in Chapter 2, which similarly played while debriefing with Chadley during that chapter's Proto-Relic quest. Continuing the quest line, we arrive at a cactus-infested modular Mako reactor, which plays a new track that, ironically, does a more overt job of evoking that desert feeling than the Corel Desert theme does. The metal stringed instruments, the carved out bass guitar, the tablas, it all sounds hot and desert-like. In what I tell myself is a Shadow of the Colossus reference, Cloud & Co. follow a beam of light coming out of a cactuar statue that leads you to these various cactuar-shaped rocks. Here we take on some cactrot, orange cactuars to the tune of Remake's Colosseum Deathmatch. Wow, it's been been a hot minute since we've heard a Honzawa track, actually. Nice to get some of that energy, although the connection between Corneo's Battle Coliseum and this Cactuar battle kind of eludes me. After the battle, Cloud hits us with the final boss of T-posing, C-posing.
Oh, shit!
The goofy scene is paired with the track It's Hard to Stand on Both Feet. Specifically, this is the Ever Crisis arrangement of the original FF7 track that originally played when crossing over from Junon to Costa del Sol. Mitsuto Suzuki took some pretty big liberties with his arrangements of the theme in Chapter 5, but this one here, like all the Ever Crisis arrangements, is much closer to its OG counterpart. The use of this theme, largely associated with Red 13 awkwardly acting like a human, suits this scene of Cloud now also contorting his body in unnatural ways. Nice. Anyway, following this battle, we can now enter that modular reactor from earlier. Inside it, we meet the one and only Kid G.
No way.
To the tune of remake Smash 'em Rip 'em, aka Honzawa's killer version of Tifa's theme. I love that track so much, although its use is a bit questionable. For one, Yuffie is the focus of this quest line, and Tifa is nowhere to be seen. I guess Kid G has boxing gloves, and Tifa also uses her fists? Sure. This scene leads us to a new Cactuar Massacre minigame, which plays Desert Rush of Desert Rush fame. The results screen uses the same track featured in both the Desert Rush minigame and the Hustle to Chocobo race outside Billy's Ranch in Chapter 2. Unfortunately, or mercifully, we can't wrap up this Proto-Relic quest in Chapter 9, so we're going to have to put a pin in it for now. Before we can head to Gongaga, however, we've got a few loose threads to wrap up. There's a side quest involving retrieving Cloud Jr., the cute bird from Chapter 7. While rescuing it from some pesky monsters, it plays Firework Blade, the Let's Go Mount Corel battle variant also from Chapter 7. Afterward, it plays Cloud Jr.'s theme, better known as Descendant of the Shinobi, best known as Yuffie's theme. And then once we cash in the quest, all the way back in North Corel, it plays Barrett's theme, Bitter Memories again. While in North Corel, if you've been keeping up with your Queen's Blood playing, we can now take on Navalan, a levitating level 5 QB player. After you defeat him, we get our second cryptic scene involving Lidrell Balmon, the creator of the card game. The music is very similar to the first scene we saw like this, back in the Crow's Nest in Chapter 4. Mostly horror-ish ambient tones, creepy piano lines. It's also got that same siren-like synth, which I'd also pointed out in a much earlier Chapter 2 side quest with Brodin. What does it all mean? Elsewhere in the desert, we can finish up a Chapter 7 side quest for Johnny and the Johnnies. Reporting back to Johnny Prime in Costa del Sol, he shows off the new and improved Johnny Seaside Inn. The accompanying track is an upbeat, jazzy pop tune that, I guess, suits Johnny's gussied up inn. And works well as a lighthearted quest resolution track, although there's not too much to write home about. Stylistically, this is quite similar, and also geographically close, to Shoya Tsunekawa's take on Tifa's theme from Chapter 6, so I'm gonna hazard a guess that this is him too. I can't make out Johnny's theme in there, although both the lead piano and saxophone hover around several bluesy melodies that are sort of Johnny-esque. However, this is sort of the epicenter of Johnny's character development in Rebirth, so if I'm correct and his theme isn't in here, it seems like an odd omission, especially for a theme that's already had 3 permutations. Actually, make that 4 variations. Right after the cutscene, once we can explore the newly renovated inn, it plays a new track. Shingo Kataoka hits us with a perfectly appropriate new arrangement of Johnny's theme. A sublimely cheesy sax-led piece with wind chimes, slide guitars, and everything you could want to evoke that luxurious coastal living. In part 21, I criticized Shima's Shinra 8 arrangement of the FF7 main theme for not being out there enough, and ultimately too similar to his standard instrumentation choice for it to really stand out. Although a lot of people like that track, so what do I know? To me, this Johnny track here follows a similar blueprint, but I think Kataoka nails the mood and tone better, thanks to his instrumentation always committing to the bit. His chameleonic prowess as an arranger when it comes to nailing various non-video game genres is really second to none, and that makes him one of the best when it comes to conveying narrative development through music. The way his Chapter 6 Seaside Inn track reinforced the barely held together state of the shack, versus how he captures its aura now, yeah, Kataoka gets it. Another change we can see at Johnny's Inn is that it now holds a record for all our achievements in the 800,000 minigames littered across the game world. Yeah, that's a lot of missing trophies still. Speaking of minigames, when Chapter 9 started, it told us that the Gold Saucer has been refreshed with a whole bunch of new Chocobo races and Musclehead Coliseum battles. There are many, and I do mean many, new tracks associated with these new Gold Saucer minigames, but for the sake of moving things forward, I'm gonna hold off on those until the story proper brings us back to Gold Saucer, a few chapters from now. I promise we'll get to those tracks, as well as all of the VR battles I've been skipping, but just not yet. Speaking of the big sauce, though, I do have 3 corrections to make, courtesy of the previous video's comment section. 1, I said the 3rd place fanfare for the Chocobo race featured Good Night Until Tomorrow on the guitar. But it was actually the Game Over theme called Continue. An embarrassingly rookie mistake. 2, in part 31, I said it plays the super chill Sony Walkman monkey track when you lose a battle in the Musclehead Coliseum. I'm afraid that is wrong. That track does play when you lose in the Beast Battleground in the Corel Prison, but in the Gold Saucer, it plays this track. Yeah, not as good as the Chill Monkey track, but there you have it. Lastly, many folks pointed out that Uematsu's writing credit for the Max Volume Diegetic track is because it's an inspired arrangement of opening Bombing Mission. That sounded familiar. Thank you everyone for the help on these corrections. There's always a treasure trove of valuable information in the comments sections of each of these videos, which I always find very educational and entertaining. If you were just watching these videos without also reading the comments, I promise you this is a positive community and you are missing out. Another YouTube comment on my last video was by none other than me, lamenting the fact that my last video got hit with 24 copyright claims from the digital rights management company that controls Square's music rights. These guys do not play ball, so really there is no YouTube money to be made from making these very long, very time-consuming Rebirth videos. I really want to get to the end of this series, and if you do too, I encourage you to support my work on Patreon. Okay, and with that, I think we are ready to head to Gongaga. As the party exits the buggy and heads into the jungle, the Gongaga area theme begins to play. This is Mitsuto Suzuki's sole area theme in Rebirth, and it's a nice, more relaxed change of pace compared to the manic and pop-heavy influence of the rest of his work in Rebirth. The Jungles of Gongaga is instead greatly inspired by world music, which I find to be a lazy term that describes a huge variety of music from around the world. However, world music is a handy term for folks to hide behind when they don't have enough knowledge to speak in more specific terms than that, so sadly that's what I'll be sticking with. From an instrumentation standpoint, we have a lot of individual percussion instruments, chimes, background flutes, and whistles that create this sort of dense yet exploratory atmosphere. It feels humid, which is appropriate for a jungle. Processing effects that create a sense of space, like reverb, are often described in terms of their general wetness, which is why Suzuki has really drenched a lot of these instruments in reverb. There's also some children chanting, which we'll hear more of in the post-Remnawave version later. The core of the piece, however, is the lead melody played on what I think is bagpipes. The way it moves between notes at times has a uniquely bagpipian articulation, right? The blend of a European instrument, associated almost exclusively with Celtic music and little else, in this otherwise African-inspired song and instrumentation definitely stands out. The entire Gongaga region is closely associated with the ancient Cetran people, both the descendants in the village, but also the many old ruins strewn across the jungle. While the Cetra are not associated one-to-one with Celtic traditions, there are certainly parallels, such as their druidism and in some of the general aesthetic depictions of them. Suzuki blending African jungle music with a very Celtic-inspired twist is wonderful musical storytelling that uses our preconceived notions of what specific instruments traditionally evoke in our minds to create something both familiar and fresh. Currently, we are listening to the version that plays when you first arrive in Gongaga, up until when you activate half the Remnawave towers. This would therefore make this the undecoded version, as per the Plus soundtrack's nomenclature, except this is not the track labeled Jungles of Gongaga Undecoded on the Plus soundtrack. That is a different track that, as far as I can tell, is not featured in the 2024 video game Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Either someone goofed while making the Plus soundtrack, or maybe they just preferred that version. The Plus version has bigger strings section and, most noticeably, omits the bagpipes and children chanting. It's a nice arrangement, but yeah, it's not in the game, bro. Anyway, once you activate enough Remnawave towers, we move on to the fuller arrangement of the track. As expected, this is a fuller version of the mix with a new adult choir right from the jump. We get bigger percussion, but also a very pleasant marimba part that plays throughout. Very nice. There's better contrast now going from the regular section to the breakdown at the 1 minute 15 mark, too. Our sense of direction and momentum is completely taken out from underneath us as we lose our driving percussion and central chord progression. The whistling, occasional drum hits, and kalimba noodling all feel sporadic and disorienting. It wonderfully captures the one universal truth of navigating the jungles of Gongaga. You are going to get completely lost multiple times. Anyway, the track builds back up after, and it feels great. It's a feel-good piece with very simple chord progressions. Not much tension at all. I was pretty sick of it by the time I 100%ed the Gongaga region intel, but I blame that on me getting lost over and over again, not the track. Great stuff. The battle variant continues Michito Suzuki's track record of not really vibing with the whole dynamic music thing. When a battle breaks out, the music doesn't dynamically crossfade, but instead just starts the battle track from the top. The plus side to this approach is that Suzuki isn't beholden to the preceding track's underlying structure and timing. As much as I love those Shima battle tracks, they are fundamentally identical to their equivalent field themes. Here instead, Suzuki writes a completely separate battle theme. I actually think calling this a battle edit feels a bit disingenuous. Different tempo, different key, with very little overlap at all. This battle variant goes for a more Middle Eastern flair, with its choices of scales and instruments. Ironically, it sounds a lot like how most video games would go about scoring their desert battle themes. This wouldn't be too out of place in FF16's Dhalmekia or Kingdom Hearts' Agrabah. So it's cool to see it not used in that kind of scenario at all, actually. As we approach the village of Gongaga, the party is ambushed by members of the Gongaga Youth Coalition. This is a short ambient track that leads directly into the next, more important piece.
What?
Nothing. For a second, I thought you were someone else.
This was a fun surprise. As the party is introduced to Cissnei, a character from the prequel games Crisis Core and Before Crisis, it plays a new arrangement of Under the Apple Tree, which itself is an acoustic guitar arrangement of the theme of Crisis Core. The Crisis Core main theme, along with all of Crisis Core's original music, was composed by Takeharu Ishimoto. So I think that would make this song here the first piece of Rebirth music that predates the remake series not composed by Nobuo Uematsu. Oh, actually, hang on. I forgot about the Hamauzu Dirge of Cerberus tracks from Yuffie's DLC. Those predate this. Anything else? Is that it? Since Cissnei is a Crisis Core character not featured in the original FF7, it makes a lot of sense why this track would show up here. Sure, Technically, the Crisis Core theme didn't really represent Cisne specifically in Crisis Core, especially not the acoustic guitar under the apple tree arrangement, but I think her showing up here in Rebirth functions as a surrogate for the Crisis Core experience, so I don't have any problem with her seemingly co-opting the theme. Shingo Kataoka does a great job evoking the feel of the original track's arrangement, but with a cleaner mix. Cisne guides the party up to Monument Hill, and once you get there, the track smoothly crossfades to a more subdued arrangement. The drums are gone and the strumming guitars ring out more, which complements the more delicate scene of the party ruminating on those who perished in the reactor explosion. There's also a reverse electric guitar in there, fluttering in the mix, which is an effect you hear in a lot of psychedelic rock, but not something I've heard in many video game soundtracks. There's also a second dynamic component here, with the track dynamically selecting one of two different outro tails, depending on where you were in the piece when you triggered this cutscene. It's not Shima levels of complexity, but it is a nice touch that allows the looping track to naturally resolve instead of just fading out. Thanks to Cisne's hospitality, the party decides to take a breather and explore the village. On cue, our next piece starts. Shingo Kataoka's Village of Gongaga theme is a lovely slice of South American quote-unquote world music. The mix is pensive and introspective, with organic instrument layers creating a very pleasant atmosphere that matches the village's relaxed pace. There's a specific instrument I can't put my finger on. It sounds like a stick hitting a metal string or something, and you can hear it through most of the track as the primary rhythm maker. Can anyone tell me what that is? Just like with Mitsuto Suzuki's Jungle theme, Kataoka's Village theme employs simple, uplifting chord progressions with minimal dramatic tension. Very nice piece. Unbeknownst to Cloud, one of the homes he ventures into belongs to Zack's parents. Here, a scene plays out between them and Aerith. The piece starts dark and ambiguously with a piano and erratic acoustic guitar. It would not be out of place on a Last of Us soundtrack. These moments are tied with Cloud's confusion as to what this place is. As the characters begin to discuss Zack, we get another theme from Crisis Core. While this theme has many permutations, its most important and popular version is the one called The Price of Freedom, which plays at various points throughout the game, including in the game's dramatic finale involving Cloud and Zack. There's also a more subdued piano-led version of the track that plays during Zack and Aerith's date in Sector 6. So the use of the theme in this scene here has a few layers to it. It's a lovely arrangement that, unlike the more faithful Crisis Core main theme we heard associated with Cissnei earlier, this one here is much bleaker and fragmented. The track fades away once Aerith motions that it's time to go. Speaking to her outside triggers our next piece.
Hey.
The pensive strings and piano captures the uneasy turmoil of Aerith second-guessing her visit of Zack's parents. I'll draw attention to the interesting texture in one of the synth pad layers at the beginning. Sounds a bit like birds singing or something. Considering our proximity to a large concentration of Mako, not to mention what we know about Aerith, these might be voices from the live stream we're hearing. Well, that or the arranger just thought it was a cool sound. Once it becomes time for Cloud to react, the music ends, waiting for you to respond. This is when something cool happens. The next audio file is slightly different depending on your choice. Specifically, as Cloud responds, the piano changes.
When you put it that way.
Once it cuts back to Aerith, though, the cutscene audio plays out the same regardless of your choice. The gentle arrangement of Aerith's theme continues to develop. As Aerith spots Tifa, we get a brief, reverse fluttery effect, a bit like the one we heard in the Monument Hill arrangement of the Cissnei track. We hear the effect again as Cloud holds his head in pain, and then once more as Tifa questions Aerith's comment about Cloud not knowing who this random Zack dude is. Elsewhere in town, we've got a couple diegetic tunes to check out. The band playing outside the tavern are serenading the patrons with a fun Celtic jig. To my great surprise, there are 4 musicians on screen and I hear 4 instruments in the music. And not just that, I hear a guitar, violin, flute, and accordion. Damn, they got it right for once. Okay, that sounds more like a wooden flute than a metal flute to me, but still, well done. Also, this track reinforces the Celtic influence on this culture and gives a bit more thematic sense to the inclusion of the bagpipe in the jungle theme. Nearby, we can find sheet music for a new piano arrangement of Cinco de Chocobo. The original FF7 Cinco de Chocobo, named after its uncommon 5/4 time signature, is the main Chocobo theme you hear while exploring the world map whilst birded. The original track was likely inspired by Dave Brubeck's late 50s jazz classic, Take 5, in the same way Electric de Chocobo was inspired by the early 60s surf rock classic, Wipeout. This is a nice piano arrangement of the theme, although it isn't the first official piano arrangement of it. Just like On Our Way in Chapter 4 and Tifa's theme in Chapter 6, this piece was also first arranged for the piano in 2003's Final Fantasy VII Piano Collections album. If you'd like to know more about Rebirth's piano minigame, you can watch, or rewatch, part 15, where I go deeper into its mechanics. On the bulletin board in town, we can also pick up some side quests. One of these leads us to the weaponsmith known as Izo. While near his home, it plays the awesome jukebox arrangement of Barrett's theme from Remake. This is an amazing arrangement by Yuichi Tsuchiya that's full of character. Its use here is a no-brainer. A Barrett-themed side quest deserves a Barrett-themed track. When we are ready to continue the story, we make our way to Cissnae's home. Once inside, though, just like in Chapter 6, we can hear Yuffie humming her theme. Although this time she's more than just humming it.
I am so bored right out of my brain. If I don't die first, bet y'all go insane. 'Cause I've got nothing else to do. I'm stuck here wasting time. But just wait, oh materia, I'll get back on the road and make you mine.
Yeah, we got actual lyrics. And not just one phrase, but the whole verse. And when you ask her about it, Yuffie boasts that she is a top-tier lyricist.
The amazing Yuffie is also a top-tier lyricist.
She then tells you she has another song,
Wanna hear it?
which she then begins to sing.
Here goes.
Although, curiously, while this other song has new lyrics, it still uses the Yuffie leitmotif.
I'll have orbs piled up about 1 billion feet tall.
So, Yuffie, what's going on here? Is this actually a different song? Because it sounds more like a second verse to her mega multi-platinum hit, I'm So Bored.
But until I can make you mine.
However, some pop stars really do just have one idea that they try to milk across an entire career. Or is the underlying melody some sort of classic Wu-Taiyan standard that gets reused in a lot of different songs from there? So many possibilities that hopefully Revelation will answer. Oh, that's why it's called Revelation. Because we're finally going to get some answers about the Wu-Tai songwriting deep lore. Okay, it is time to hit the sack. Cloud is rudely awakened by the sound of a weapon's cry, and then on cue, as Yuffie barges into his room, the track Weapon's Cry begins to play. The intro to this track plays the opening melody and response of the Lifestream theme before rolling into a new arrangement of a different original FF7 track, Attack of the Weapon. This is Rebirth's second arrangement of the Weapons theme, following its appearance back in Chapter 7. It's lacking the aggressive tempo of the original, but I think that would have felt a bit too manic for this scene here. Similarly, the original has this rising, modulating melody effect that really creates a sense of urgency. But for this version, the last note of the melody is much more subdued and sad, which reinforces the unknown and uncertainty of the character's emotions. The quick, screeching strings of the original are still there, although their placement is slightly changed. We also get a bit of Those Chosen by the Planet, which was also part of the original theme. A section we skip over, however, is the more melodic back half of the original. They're saving that for a little bit later. Upon returning to Monument Hill, i.e. Mandatory Music Transition Hill, we crossfade to a new cutscene track. The frantic violin trill is devoid of much rhythm, meaning the crossfade doesn't need to be perfectly timed to sound good. We get a dour, minor key version of the Lifestream leitmotif on low strings, followed by Those Chosen by the Planet as Cissnei and the party begin to discuss the Whispers.
Whispers.
Yeah, that's right, the Whispers are back.
No way.
Interestingly, we do not get a reference to the Whispers theme, nor Barrett's theme for that matter, and instead we stay on Those Chosen by the Planet. As Yuffie's goal-oriented mindset kicks in, the track shifts to an upbeat major key. The rhythm of the staccato strings evoke Let the Battles Begin, and we eventually hear its melody as well. We return to Those Chosen by the Planet again as the cutscene ends, then transitions back to the preceding track, Weapons Cry. This plays out the same as before the cutscene until we reach the southern exit of Gongaga Village, at which point it crossfades to a slightly different arrangement. This second half has a pulsing bass synth and more pronounced percussive elements. The attack of the weapon melody is closer to the original this time, with its modulation and constant rising effect. We also get the more emotional part of the attack of the weapon theme, skipped over in the first half, and it sounds great. This then beautifully leads into Those Chosen by the Planet before the track repeats. Once the party reaches the ruins of the Gongaga reactor, the music fades out, allowing us to hear the ambient sounds of nature reclaiming the region.
Nature came back swinging.
That's the Mako-rich land. What's good for life is great for reactors.
Upon the reveal of the Whispers, our next track starts. There's a lot crammed into this short piece. The first melody we hear is from the Whispers theme, although it isn't the main Whispers leitmotif. We can hear this melody in the build-up to the main melody in Masashi Hamauzu's original Whispers theme from Remake. On Sephiroth's reveal, we get a bit of his other theme, One-Winged Angel. Following that, we get a 7-note melody that I know I've heard before, but I can't put my finger on it. I did a quick scan of all the old Yoshitaka Suzuki tracks and I couldn't find it, but I don't know, I've definitely heard it. So if you know what it is, please let me know. Following this cutscene, the action shifts to Scarlet aboard the Relnica, foreshadowing our future fight with her. The moody piece that plays underneath the scene is simple and free of melodies. As gameplay resumes, we get our next dungeon exploration theme. Fast orchestral percussion ushers in a new, full arrangement of Masashi Hamauzu's Whispers theme. It lacks the choir of the remake original, but otherwise follows its general structure. Afterward, however, Yoshitaka Suzuki begins to incorporate elements from Uematsu's Mako reactor theme, which is plenty appropriate, what with us being in an old Mako reactor. Interestingly, this inclusion seems to have been missed by whoever made the liner notes for the Rebirth original soundtrack, since only Masashi Hamauzu is credited as the composer. And speaking of Uematsu, Hamauzu, and the Whispers theme, I've always found that the Whispers theme might have been inspired by, and in direct conversation with, Listen to the Cries of the Planet. Yeah, one's a 5-note melody, the other one is 6, although they have quite similar movement and cadence. And originally I wasn't going to bring this up in this video, but burgeoning YouTuber FF7 Music recently made a video specifically on how Listen to the Cries of the Planet had been repurposed in the Remake series to also represent Remake's new mysteries, such as the existence of the Whispers. That video reminded me of my Remake era theory about the Whispers theme and Listen to the Cries of the Planet being sibling pieces, interpolated enough for Hamauzu not to have to share the writing credit. So yeah, take that as you will. Anyway, this track here is a 2-minute loop, which is usually plenty, but for the way they use it in Chapter 9, I find it to be a bit inadequate. This track plays from the moment you enter into the Gongaga reactor all the way to the boss room at the very end, which takes about 20-30 minutes to reach. This is on par with most Remake series dungeons, except this track has zero variations, nor even a battle arrangement. It all flows the same regardless of what you are doing in this dungeon. I wonder if this half-hour chunk of The Whispers Beckon is the longest instance of a single, uninterrupted piece of music in all of Rebirth. Like, think about it. You might spend 5 hours mopping up open-world side quests, but even then, every time you hop on your chocobo or enter a battle, the music will change. Or the other day, I spent a good hour and a half repeating the third course of the Glide to Chocobo minigame in Chapter 10, and yeah, that really sucked. But even then, the music would stop, pause, and restart every time I failed to get the high score. And also, I don't mean just standing still and letting a track idle or deliberately avoid all enemies in an area. The Whispers Beckon plays for about half an hour even as you are making forward momentum on the main story. I'd be really curious to hear if there are any comparable or maybe even longer instances than this. Because in Rebirth of all games, this seems like a very extreme, unique oddity. Anyway, once you get to the reactor core, the music fades out.
Well now, would you look at that?
Following the ominous close-up of Cloud, the appropriately titled Mako overdose begins.
Let's get to work. Too much Mako here.
We open with what sounds to me like the Final Fantasy prelude on strings, before transforming into an intense arrangement of the Shinra theme. Upon Scarlet summoning forth big, likely Genova cells-infused science experiments from Shinra's R&D, the strings briefly allude to the classic Genova synth riff before transforming into a battle arrangement of the Lifestream theme. The Lifestream as a full-on battle theme is pretty novel, although it doesn't take long for the piece to also include elements from the Shinra theme as well. The blending of Shinra and Lifestream themes is an idea we've seen Suzuki explore a few times now. We covered its use in Chapter 2, during the Secret Report open world activity, and then again in Chapter 7's Gigatrees boss fight, and in some of Chapter 8's Haunted Hotel tracks. Yeah, some of those are debatable. It's a logical pairing that echoes the series' wide central conflict between Shinra and the planet. A bit later in the piece, there's an interesting little section that stuck out to me. We get these short horn bursts, followed by strings response. The strings are a bit winding like the Genova bass synth line, but I also wondered if this might not be a part of Genova Complete. back to this a bit later in the track too, so hold on to that thought. We return to the Shinra theme, both its A and B sections, and then return to the Jenova synth riff on strings. Once you've taken out all of Scarlet's amalgams, the track jumps to a new cutscene cue. As the specimen H1024 lands in front of the party, we hear another blending of Shinra, Lifestream, and Jenova. This is a familiar looking boss, and the same is true of its music. The boss theme for Specimen H1024 sounds just like Remake's Specimen H0512's boss theme, which in turn was a variation of the Crab Warden boss fight from Chapter 5 of Remake. It should sound especially familiar to Rebirth players because a variation of Crab Warden, was also used for the Midgarstormer boss fight we covered at the end of Chapter 2. This is the track's fourth appearance as a storyline boss theme in the Remake trilogy, which I think would make it the most reused mainline boss theme in the entire series so far. I mean, it's still a great track, especially once you get the boss down to 50% health. At this point, we get a phase transition cutscene that riffs on Let the Battles Begin and Lifestream, and also a very fast violin articulation that once again reminds me of Jenova Complete. Anyway, after the cutscene, the track shifts over to the kick-ass metal arrangement first used in the Midgarstormer fight. It still kicks ass, although there isn't anything new we haven't already discussed back in Part 10. I will be honest though, the first time I heard this track, part of me was disappointed that it was just the Midgarstormer arrangement again. Rebirth has fully cooked my mind because were this any other JRPG, I would not bat an eye at hearing a repeated boss theme. It's not even remotely a bad thing to have a boss theme repeat, but because of the very unrealistic standards Rebirth has established, that gluttonous precedent of always getting something new, it creates a strange expectation when, God forbid, they dare to repeat a boss theme, let alone a great one, in the main story. It's a weird sensation. Anyway, once you defeat Specimen H1024, it jumps to the track's outro, although this outro wasn't included on the original soundtrack, probably because it was already over 8 minutes long. So for naming's sake, I'm going to have to treat this as a separate track. As Cloud huffs some Mako fumes, we immediately shift over to an ominous piano and low synth pad. This is an arrangement of Who Am I?, a track very closely associated with scenes of Cloud's disintegrating psychosis. I sure hope nothing bad happens to my boy.
You alright?
When the scene shifts to Scarlet and her red Gundam, we return to the Shinra theme at its biggest and most powerful. The scene ends on a cliffhanger, with the music too ending on an inconclusive chord and single note. Alright, that's half of Chapter 9 in the bag. We've got some great tunes coming up in the next episode, including a new favorite of mine. Also, since the last episode came out, Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3, now known as Final Fantasy VII Revelation, has been announced. I released a video all about the music featured in the game's 2 trailers, and I encourage you to check that out if you haven't yet. The big takeaway is that Revelation is on track to be released in about 10 to 12 months. That is much less time than I had anticipated for wrapping up Music of the Lifestream, although I would say that at my current pace, I am more or less on track, especially if the game ends up getting a short delay, which I would guess is likely. For now, I'm staying the course. The next planned video on the channel is part 34 of Music of the Lifestream, which will close out Chapter 9, followed by a video all about Street Fighter V. There are only 2 videos left in my Street Fighter mini-series, and by the way, now that Tifa is a canon Street Fighter character, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but as an FF7 fan, you are contractually obligated to watch all of my ongoing Street Fighter music retrospective series. Sorry, I don't make the rules. You're leaving valuable Tifa lore on the table. But hey, it could be worse. You could be a Street Fighter fan who now has to watch 33 episodes of Music of the Lifestream to figure out who Tifa is. Good luck with that. Alright, talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.